Welcome back, everyone. This is the Enough to Keep Going podcast for the week of November 2nd, 2025. There is nothing like that music when you've been gone for a week like I have. You hear that music kick in, and it's a comfort feeling. I know that I am back to a place of friends, a place to talk about some games that we love, talk about the industry that we appreciate, and engage with the community that is always here with us. So I am your host tonight, DBQ Hams. I was off last week. Game Logic and Master held it down, and I was very thankful for that. I am back, and this is Master's time to take a little break. And Game Logic, thank you for being here with us tonight, running the boards as always. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. We've got a full agenda for the night.
We do. So let's get to it. All right. So as we do every week on Enough to Keep Going, we are gonna hit some of the big games of the week that we've been playing, then head into the news of the week and wrap it up with other things that have been on our playlist over the course of the week. And if you are watching us live, feel free to join into the chat. We are glad to always have your comments and conversation. And if you are joining us and listening to us after the fact, we record every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you were like me and celebrated daylight savings time with an extra hour of gaming, congratulations. So, Game Logic, you've got a big game this week that came out from Obsidian. I've got it downloaded, but I have not had a chance to play it yet. So you've had a chance to dabble in Outer Worlds too.
Yeah, I have. So I haven't gotten that far into it. Just kind of got started. It is an Obsidian game, so I mean that's a positive for me. I've always been a huge fan of their RPGs. The character creation in this is decent enough. I'm sure there are other levels you can dig into if you really want to get into it. I wasn't super wrapped around the axle about the character that I rolled. What was nice is beyond the like the cosmetics and stuff. There are neat things to fill out your background and kind of have your backstory kind of in there, which I thought was pretty good. I took 2 perks, I think, like in leadership and resilience. So, like, I get some bonuses when I go down. That gives me a little longer, like, bleed out time and attempt to recover type of stuff. In order to take 2 perks, I had to take a negative. I can't remember what it's called,
right?
In the game. What's that?
A flaw or a fault or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
And I wound up choosing dumb. So, which is very kind of unusual for me, just in kind of like, anything that I've ever like participated in or role playing or like, so anytime I run into like, and there are like space anomalies and stuff that you run into here. So as a huge Star Trek fan, and kind of, and then even from an education and training perspective, like identifying, with like some of the other things that I do with work, identifying the notion that in order to have certain types of workforces that we're eventually going to want to have, that those workforces have to be like more intelligent, that like our education system is like, and so I always kind of am interested in kind of the Star Trek thing where like the baseline minimum that people get exposed to in school and in college is like significantly beyond like obviously what we get exposed to and what kids get exposed to here today in America. So it's super interesting that contrary to most RPGs that you're in, when you get presented with space anomalies and other things like that and other matters of physics and things, like my character just has like no clue. So it's interesting because what it made me think of is kind of like in Star Trek, like in Enterprise or in Firefly with like Malcolm Reynolds, right? You get characters who have leadership capabilities and who like people follow and people trust, but they're really not all that smart, right? When it comes to like computers and physics and time anomalies and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to role play a character like that.
They may be the captain, but they're not necessarily the smartest man on the ship.
Exactly, which is, contrary to a lot of archetypes where even if they aren't the smartest person, like they're still able to keep up with a lot of the more scientific types. So in order to, in taking that dumb flaw or whatever, I had to cap certain abilities, and so there are abilities that like I can't improve in. So again, it's just kind of interesting. I had one thing that I ran into.
Can I go back to that cap piece? Because
Yeah,
that's different from the original, from Outer Worlds the one. I don't remember that being the flaw piece. Feels like it's an addition here in terms of kind of forcing a choice or giving you some limitations on your character.
It could be, and I don't really recall that well. So I had one kind of, I won't necessarily call it a bug, just maybe a design element that I wasn't super crazy about. There's one point in this opening sequence here where you are given an additional weapon, and that weapon does not manifest itself. Like, it doesn't immediately equip itself. It doesn't go into your hand. And I spent a ton of time like, where is this weapon? Like, did I actually, was it actually given to me? Was it like deposited in the room? Was I supposed to go pick it up? And I don't think I've missed a tutorial, but there seems to be a lot of assumptions here that you played the Outer Worlds, and that you remember all of like the controls. I may have missed it, but like I went into the controls and I didn't see like a button for you to like open your inventory. So it took me a while to figure out like how to open my inventory, and then I was like, oh, that weapon that I was given is actually here. It's just like and like even when you open your inventory, like certain things don't present like right away. You kind of have to like dig through and go to like a second screen to see some things. So that I wasn't super happy about, because I spent a significant amount of time in combat like not having that weapon, and thought that I had just like screwed up an event trigger or missed something, and I googled it, and they said, yeah, if you don't do like exactly this, then like you don't get the weapon. So I thought that I had whiffed on it. But I am playing it on the Xbox Series X. There's been commentary out there that there are performance problems with this game, that the frame pacing isn't great, that you can throw some pretty chunky hardware at it and still not get everything out of it, kind of showing the same kind of hardware optimization problems that Starfield had. I'm playing it on the Series X and it seems to be doing fine. It appears, from what I've read, that is the case on both PC and on PlayStation 5 Pro. So I don't know that it's necessarily like a great accolade to say that it plays best on Xbox Series X, but that is currently the state, and that's where I'm playing it right now. You get dialogue trees you see as you're going through here. It is interesting. I mean, you can see the effects of like the flaw that I picked, where you're presented. There's dialogue options that are grayed out or whatever that you can't select. There are action options that will be redded out so that you can't select them when it comes time to like make a choice of like which way to go on the level or where to send your people. So it's been pretty interesting so far. I enjoy, the combat isn't like, it's not like Ghost of Yotei combat, right? It's not like super great first person shooter kind of combat.
So what I remember from the first one was that the combat was almost like a modified VATS from Fallout. Is this one of the things I've read about this, is that you can have the VATS or you can not have it, and that like affects your skill tree or your points a little bit as well.
I haven't been exposed to VATS, but again, like I said, my impression here is that there's not a lot of hand holding, and there's an assumption that you played the first one, so I don't know how to get into that system.
Are you finding it? Does it feel like a dice roll as you shoot, or is it pretty straightforward FPS
Yeah,
accuracy?
no, it feels like it's you.
Okay.
And maybe there's some variance going on in there. That'll for instance, that dumb skill that I selected, like I can't level up ranged weapons. I think the only thing that I can be skilled in is melee, and that
I mean,
I can't
clearly
tell
you're
that
not
that's
smart enough to shoot from a distance is obviously the point.
well, I think it's more a matter of like you can't like master some of the technical skills that are associated with like shooting. Um, but uh but I haven't felt like that's like super negatively affected me. I mean, maybe it does, but again, I don't really have a baseline to know like how much better I would be if I could level up ranged weapons. So it doesn't appear to be like super holding me back or anything. So it's been fun. Shout out to Hero Down Under in the chat. So I appreciate you swinging through.
Yeah,
I
glad to
know,
have you here, Hero. Yep.
I know you're living in the future, and today's a work day for you. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming through, and feel free to hang out as long as you can. But
Are you
yeah,
finding the story engaging? Does it? I mean, it takes place like 100 years in the future from the original Outer Worlds, and so I'm curious if you're since you didn't play the first one, do you find the story engaging, or is it feel like you are experiencing this because it's a big name release on a shallow Xbox calendar?
no, it feels fine. I mean, it's not like I said, it's not it's not Expedition 33. It's not Ghost of Yotei. It's not Death Stranding 2. It's serviceable. It's very campy, which is fine. Like if you're into camp and you appreciate like that quirky humor, it's fine. It's not gonna give you any deep thoughts and make you like reconsider like the way of your life. It's very much kind of near comedy, like almost in like kind of like that Firefly way, in that like there's organizations and things in here that are just like there's no organization that's like in the middle. Like every organization seems to be like far on the right side of the spectrum of like just how kooky an organization like that would be if its centric motivation was like X. So you have some that are ultimately dedicated to a religion. You have some that are ultimately dedicated to their way of government. So it's been
Yeah,
interesting.
I heard about like the extreme capitalists or the religious aspects, but also the people that are dedicated to like a numeric equation that everything needs to center around that. So it does feel like it's it's satire in the extremes.
Absolutely. And I've only gotten the first couple of hours into it. I would say, and kind of after the opening sequence, you land on a planet, and go to your first major city that's called Paradise City. And the only thing that I've observed from them is I'm not super crazy about the pathing. Um, there's been a couple instances where it like hasn't necessarily been super clear on like where you're supposed to go next. I just kind of wound up stumbling upon it. But like this is a game. I mean, you asked the question of like whether or not I'm super engaged in the story or if the story is kind of shallow. I will say, given the array of things that I have on my plate that I could play, this game only weaves a tapestry so far, and I would just as soon not expend a ton of time in the game like figuring out where I need to go. Like this is a game that I'm like, there's only but so much here. Just give me a laser beam and tell me where to go, right? So I can get through the story. But yeah, I'm having a fun time with it so far. It's got enough systems in it for you to kind of really make like a build, and that will give you options as you go through each of these sequences on kind of like how you want to approach it, and that's good. Just in kind of having enough breadth of kind of how things will unfold differently from one player to the next. But I'm having a pretty good time with it so far.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into it. Hopefully can talk about it next week. Just looking at this cutscene that you're playing, like you can clearly see the lineage of Fallout 3 and Obsidian and Bethesda. Where this tracks from, right? Obsidian they did Fallout New Vegas off of the Fallout 3 Bethesda engine, and then came with Outer Worlds back in 2019, I believe. Earlier this year, Obsidian, there we go, has had both Avowed at the beginning of this year and now, Outer Worlds 2. So we get both the Elder Scrolls equivalent and the Fallout equivalent coming from Obsidian over the course of 2025. So right here in this gameplay that you've got, the kind of the coloration that's happening, is that because you're low on health and that's part of the effect to show that you're dying?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Nice. All right. Well, yeah, I'll be curious to see, given, as you said, all that you have potentially on your plate that you could be playing, if this is something that is a curiosity or if this is something that you feel compelled to continue looking at. I also wouldn't be surprised if this sees a handful of patches to try to address some of the pathing and the navigation stuff that you're talking about, to make it a little more streamlined for people. So it'll be interesting to see. And then I have it downloaded on PC, so I'll be curious to kind of compare notes after the fact to see how the performance is there on PC versus what you're seeing on Series X.
Yeah, and I mean, and the last thing I'll say is, you'll probably see in a little bit of the gameplay here. You have to be a little forgiving of this game, right? Because I'm pegging guys like from across the quad here with this pistol, and they're taking damage, and 2 or 3 shots and they go down. Now I'm playing on normal. Obviously, that will probably change in scale, but there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief. You can determine if that makes you feel like a super soldier, right? That you're able to take people out with a pistol from across the way like that, or you could feel like it's severely lacking in realism. I'm not sure where I land with that. I was obviously happy, being that I wasn't able to scrounge and find that weapon and bring it up, although literally right at this moment I have that weapon on me, and it made this fight very different. So I was personally happy that it happened. Like you see, I just hit that guy, and there'll be other people that I hit, and it takes off like half their health, when I hit them from across this thing. So, that guy right there, the one shot. Now, some of that is probably like dice roll, right, in terms of like a critical hit. So
sure.
Maybe that's good, in some ways, but yeah.
I think the other piece, it also speaks to the emphasis here is the story and the role playing and the character building more so than it is the combat, right? Like knowing that it's been built on multiple generations of an engine. Yeah, the combat is a means to an end of getting you through and creating a narrative for you, not necessarily because of the high pressure competitive kill boxes that are going to be created here. All right. Well, thanks, Game Logic. Let's move on to another game, also very narrative heavy. So I was off last week, but have had a chance to play some Dispatch. So Dispatch is the game from Ad Hoc Studios, which is made up of some Telltale alum. We talked about this 2 weeks ago as it was coming out. Dispatch is both kind of a narrative, story-based game, but also with a little bit of, asset management in it, as you are sending out different heroes into the world to address different crimes and events that are happening. So it came out last week. Last week had 2 episodes. There's 8 episodes total. And so for the next 4 weeks, you get 2 episodes a week. So right now there's 4 episodes out, and I've had a chance to play through all 4 episodes. And I gotta say, like, this is one of the few games this year that I immediately think of in terms of our end of the year game conversations. Like, this game is, I'm sucked into this world. The narrative is really interesting. It is the animations and the character designs and the art style feels like I'm watching an animated superhero cartoon. Not quite as bloody and as violent as something like Invincible, but very much kind of a relative modern superhero cartoon. And it is you start off you spend a lot of the first episode in a couple of different QuickTime events and some narrative pieces, and you really don't get to the dispatching of heroes until toward the end of that first episode. And for the other episodes, you probably get 2 different rounds of dispatching heroes or quote unquote heroes. Part of the narrative is that you're rebuilding some, you're rehabilitating some previous supervillains that have been captured and are trying to turn over a new leaf. And so you're dispatching them out. And sometimes it's things like you've got to go put out a fire and it is looking for somebody with speed. You've got to protect an assassination attempt, and so you're looking for someone with strength and vigor. And so each of your characters have a 5-character kind of scale, in terms of 5-point scale, in terms of combat and vigor and speed and charisma and intelligence. And so depending on the different missions you get, you want to be able to, sometimes you can send just 1 hero out, sometimes you can send up to 3. And part of the kind of juggling, the resource management aspect of this is you will have these missions pop up. Basically, this is Uber for superheroes, that these missions will pop up on your screen, and you are the one kind of dispatching out the superheroes, and they will occur concurrently. And so you may not have, like, a mission may have up to 3 heroes that can be sent out, but you only have 1 hero sitting that's available. Some are traveling to the last dispatch, some are coming back from that. Like, they can't be reassigned en route. They have to go do the mission, come back to base, and then they can be reassigned. There is a cooldown, a resting period. You can get some perks that allow you to, kind of shortcut that, or, so as you level up, you get some of those things. But then as you have the ability, as your heroes complete successful missions, they can earn skill points as well. And so they can add, or you get to choose to add skill points to their 5 different sets. And so sometimes it's a matter of somebody who's, a fast superhero, but is kind of not great in combat. Do you want to continue to build up their speed so that they can be dispatched quickly, or do you want to build up their combat or their intelligence so that they can go on a variety of missions? And so the way that it works is you send them out into those missions, and then once the timer is complete, you get kind of a Venn diagram of the grid of their skill points. Here's what was required for this mission. Here's what your heroes had. And if you completely overlap what was required, it's an automatic success. If you don't, you get kind of a little bit of randomness as a icon bounces around to try to see if it lands in the overlap or if it lands outside. So sometimes you can succeed in the mission. I've had missions where I've only had like 30% of overlap because I sent somebody who I thought was good and wasn't necessarily good, but the randomness landed in my spot. I've had times where I've had 80% overlap and the randomness is still landed outside. It's not too punishing in terms of what success is. I haven't necessarily failed out on anything, but it does impact the level of experience that your characters can build. During these missions, you'll get some, kind of disrupt events that sometimes, as they're called back, and you need to give them additional guidance. Sometimes that guidance is like, how would they handle a situation? And that would depend on the character that you sent. Like, is the character highly charismatic or highly combative? And the success of that depends on the character's traits. There's also in there, sometimes you also encounter a hacking mini game as you're kind of moving along a grid and need to type in some inputs, directional inputs on your WSD or on your gamepad in order to bypass and create the right connections in the hacking mini game. Most of the time it's been pretty forgiving, but as I've gotten into the fourth episode, there's been some that are, I mean, I failed out of some of them because they're, the timing of it. You have a timing window that continues to decrease. You have intruder alerts or like antiviruses that'll try to stop you as you're hacking in. And so you've got to kind of move around the path or shut off different nodes to block them. So there's some activity there, but really a lot of it is the narrative. A lot of it is the animated storytelling that falls back into the traditional telltale aspect. So as you get out of these dispatch situations, you'll get into different, narrative cutscenes that will have you make some story choices. You'll get the standard telltale aspect of this character will remember this, right? Or so it's not doing a whole lot different on that narrative aspect, but it has created a world that is really unique, really interesting. There's a whole lot of superheroes that exist in this world. There are superhero teams that exist. There's super villains. There are super villains who were once a superhero that have turned against them. And so there's lots of nuance here. Being in episode 4 out of 8, one of the things that I haven't, like, the first episode really gets into what I think would be the overarching narrative of this of your main character, the person who is playing the dispatch. And in the other 3 episodes so far, you're not spending much time on what that overall kind of revenge tale is. So it'll be interesting to see in the last 4, like in the second half of this, how much of that turns up. But at the same time, as I'm playing it, 8 episodes feels quick. Like I could see this being a world that has multiple seasons of content available to it. So really enjoying it, so much so that I've purchased the art book and the soundtrack. It's a really fun experience. It's again, limited interaction, but as a narrative experience, super rewarding and engaging.
Now, DBQ, do you know anything about like the backstory of the studio, Ad Hoc Studios?
Not much other than the fact that they were made up of the people that were at Telltale. Or at least a majority of some of them. Telltale. Okay, so some of them were from Telltale, some of them were from Ubisoft. Night School Studios is also what's showing up. So I don't know a whole lot of their backstory, but I know a little bit of their lineage.
Now, and have you read anything about? I guess they were originally planning to make a live action interactive television show, and then
Really?
yeah.
No, I didn't realize that. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me from the narrative that they're trying to create, but I think it works really well in a video game form because you don't have to, the 2D animation doesn't have to necessarily rely on heavy CGI in terms of cost saving.
And then talk a little bit about like the animation style, like and how much of it is there. So I know I've seen some scenes where there's like drama, like back at like the station, essentially. But like, are you actually following the action like out on missions, or do you just get like reports back or like a little cutscene of that?
Yeah, so when you're sending them out in the dispatch aspect, it is very much a static screen that you've got a map, and you can see really the only action you see is the after action report of the kind of Venn diagram to see where that goes. So there's the most kind of animated aspects are in that narrative in between. And yes, Hero Down Under, these are Steel series. So thanks for asking.
And is it cell shaded?
No, it feels like a full on kind of hand drawn or good quality. Like if you've seen things like Harley Quinn on HBO Max, Invincible on Amazon Studios, it's very much in that kind of modern 2D animated style.
Okay. And I think what you mentioned was that the episodic format is working for you because you don't have to take off and dedicate like a whole 40 hours to like a game. Like it comes in and you can play a little bit and then you can go on about your business back to your other games. Is that the case?
I'm enjoying the episodic aspect. I mean, granted, I kind of played through these in like 2 big batches. So, but at the same time, as Hero Down Under said, like he'll pick it up when all episodes are out. Like I totally get that because now that I'm waiting for the next round of content, I'm definitely eager for it. Like I'm like you do in a streaming series. You feel like, you're anticipating the next drop. And so that in and of itself is, significant in terms of its engagement, that it doesn't feel like I'm kind of slogging through and hoping to get through it before the next time. I feel like I'm devouring it and eager for the next drop.
Now, is it playing like a visual novel or like a 4X game?
Oh, it's very much a visual novel with a little bit of resource management in between. Yep. Like the meat and potatoes of it are a visual novel. And then there's that additional interaction. And that even one of the things that I'll be interested in, because I already know that I'm going to want to come back and do some different choices. So I'll be curious if some of those, how much of the resource management aspect, success or failure, impacts the overall story. All right. Well, I know that I'm going to be talking about it more as it comes out. And Hero Down Under, I'm glad you're going to pick it up. I think it's really, if you enjoy any type of superhero narratives, Dispatch has a lot for you. So, game logic. Let's move off of superheroes and narrative based into. You've been going back to Ghost of Yotei.
Yeah, and I mean you can kind of think that Atsu is a superhero. I know she kind of ranks up there in that way for me. Yeah, I've been continuing to plow through this. It is a. I mean, it is a game that kind of pulls you in and holds you. I mean, there's tons of things to do. We've kind of talked about those aspects before. That you're riding across the landscape. I mean, first of all, again, you pull out your spyglass, and I'm being more intentional at this point in the game because I'm hunting down one of the Yotei 6. So I am kind of dedicated to tracking that person down. It is a fairly lengthy process for the one that I'm going after, with a lot of twists and turns, and kind of it feels like I'm playing a procedural drama in terms of like there's little bits and pieces here and there of the story, like in chapters that you're getting to, and along the way, you ride across the countryside, and you encounter things like here I just randomly came across the homestead of one of my favorite vendors who outfits you with gear, and as I'm stopping at her house. Now, this is also a person who I've only encountered in a bar, right, in a in a pub, or whatever, the Japanese equivalent of that. And so here, out of the blue, in this new territory that I've traveled to hunt down one of the Yotei 6, You know, I've happened to run into her home, and currently her home is filled with Ninetales, who are like the ninja clan or whatever. That
So this was totally a happenstance encounter. This was not anything directed at a map or.
No, it was not. It was not deliberate. It was not a mission that was given to me.
Neat.
It's just something that unfolded in the course. And I'm on my way back now to rendezvous with a contact who's been helping me chase down the Yotei 6, and she's just found new information, and I'm going back to try and connect with her. But like I said, I run across this household with bad people in it. So, and then you get just tons of tactical options. Like this is like I've literally never done this before, which is that I rolled into the area. There were lots of people there, and these guys use some different ambush tactics. So it's not kind of like fighting like Saito's men, like who are kind of like will engage you in a straight up fight. Like these guys are always using tricks, and like you saw them like popping out of the snow and stuff. So like at this point, I'm like, I honestly have no idea how many of these guys are here. So I just decided I'm going to run up to the roof and kind of give myself some separation. Use my bow. I've just recently, or actually, this is a story where you acquire a new skill with the bow, and so that's also one of the awesome things in the story. In that acquiring skills is not so much like a deliberate deterministic path. You will engage in missions that are side missions, and Hero was here and he's mentioned it too, that like again the side missions don't feel like side missions, like they feel like inherent organic parts of the story. And so in the course
That's
of
such a I love that, because it's such a contrast to Assassin's Creed Shadows, where even if the setting is somewhat similar, the aspect of side missions being engaging versus map clearing is significant.
Yeah, and Hero, I also got the kunais, and Brap and I have been talking every other day, sharing our experiences with this. And it was interesting last week because as he and I were both operating in this region, he took on some village missions, which you are presented like as soon as you come off the ferry if you choose to engage in them. I didn't. I bypassed them because I was like, my priority was chasing this guy down. And in the course of that, he, there were different things. He got faction loyalty and some other things by, helping out that village, but he didn't get the kunais. I bypassed that and just randomly came, again, in a very similar way, randomly came across a farm and then proceeded to engage in a mission and then encountered like the character that gives you the kunai. So like, and here again, I just randomly came across this house. I'm going to wind up helping one of these characters out, and that's the person who gives you an additional skill with the bow. So it in that way, it doesn't make it feel like such a path-oriented, like deliberate, well, let me go here and get this skill, let me go here and get that skill, let me go here and get that skill. It is just like I have no idea what type of warrior I'm going to end up being. And other people will become a different kind of warrior, right? Because of the path that they choose and the random encounters that they run into. Everybody's going to wind up with different armor sets and things like that. So it's just super interesting. And it's super interesting just in terms of being in the game, but it's also super interesting in terms of being in the conversation of the people that are experiencing it, because we're all having different experiences. So it's
Yeah, I think, like you said in the beginning of the transition from Dispatch to this, like there is a lot of narrative here, and it's also somewhat creative, user creative narrative, because it's not simply scriptive and linear. Is that what you're experiencing is telling you and creating a story for you, but it can be a little different than what Hero Down Under is experiencing because of when you ran into things and how you encountered them, which is a great sign for what Sucker Punch has created.
Yeah, and and the combat is something masterable. Like it's there are certain skills that you need to, and I mean like you, the gamer, like need to um develop and achieve. There's certain there's certain mechanics and certain tells and things like that, and so it's all building this you know set of capabilities that you're developing by the number of repetitions that you go through being presented with these enemies. um and then again, and then you're also given like an arsenal of different fighting styles and different weapons. And here at this point in the game, I've got a fairly wide number of things to choose from. um Here, these are additional people that have come in to the area, and I've selected my heavy bow, and so and at the end of the day, I'll wind up not actually engaging any of these guys because I'm going to take them both out with a heavy bow, and then that's it, right? Like, so much for that challenge, So it's just really pleasant how you can approach different challenges different ways. um, in kind of another set of adventures around this time frame, um, I encountered I camped. A random Ronin came by and told me about a location. I was on my way to that location. I ran into another character at random on my way to that location who he asked me to come with him to engage with him on another side mission. So yeah, it's just it's it's probably the most rewarding thing from playing this is that when you have this discussion with other people, it doesn't sound like you're talking about a game. It sounds like you're talking about like an experience, right? A thing that you engaged in because it is just so organic and widely varied in terms of kind of what you're participating in. So yeah, it's pretty impressive.
That is really impressive, right? To be what is effectively a third person action game, but to have this wide pathing for the narrative is a real feat. And the fact that it seems to be hitting on all cylinders in that aspect. Go ahead. What were we going to say? Game logic.
It feels like there are so many moments as you're going through this that it feels like you're knocking on the door of an immersive sim. And Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is out this year, and we'll get lots of accolades during awards season, and it's a very deep and very rich game, but it's also encumbered by a lot of burdensome baggage, right? This, to me, is giving me many of the same feelings that I have from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 in a slicker, easier to get into, naturally unfolding. Like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, there's a ton of like looking at the map and figuring out where to go, and you were told this, and like I got to go over there. And yes, sometimes some things happen along the way, but it just feels so kind of like heavyweight and prodigious, and constantly opening the map to see if you're on the right place. And I think some of that is because some of the navigation aspects that would be helpful, the quality of life stuff that would be helpful, aren't there. Obviously, being given a horse and flowers that accelerate the horse probably help with that. Um, but the two are very similar, and the two are very similar in their the experience that they reward you with. But I feel like one is just a lot more efficient, and as Swiss would say, kind of let you get to the fun quicker and more so and more often, right, and more frequently. So yeah, having a good time with it.
Nice. Hero Down Under asks if you have got the Kusagama yet.
No, I have not gotten that yet. I have the two bows. I have the short bow and the heavy bow. I have the shinobi like smoke breath or whatever, and the kunais, which are the throwing knives. And then I have the katana, the double katana, and the odachi, which is this big, heavy, like two-handed sword. that just really does a ton of damage, right? It is not the easiest sword to like parry with, but Bannon is just like a wrecking ball, like in combat when you arm it.
Nice. I am, as you're talking about this, I'm struck by how different the way you describe this than what I think about Sony's other first party high profile studios, right? Like the experience that you're describing here feels dramatically different than what Naughty Dog and The Last of Us Part 2 created, and feels different than what Guerrilla and Horizon Forbidden West created.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a I don't want to say what you're saying is unfair, but there's a bit of dissonance rate in some of the comparisons, right? In terms of, you remember years ago we would talk very in depth about the near linear wide path, right, design
Sure.
pattern,
Yep.
which was kind of what Sony called. There are things that we were made to feel like an open world, but weren't open world. And one of the things we talked about at the time, for me, was how much that aggravated me. Like it just felt like it felt like I was living in like a biodome that was trying to fake me out and convince me that I
Right.
was on
I
the
do
planet
remember this
Earth.
conversation, right? It's not the best of both worlds. It's the
Right.
worst of either, is that you feel like you're not able to do enough of one or the other.
Right. And so this is open world. And so it's fairly interesting because in some ways, going back from a historical perspective, we had kind of convinced ourselves that this was going to be something that PlayStation would not do. That other people did open world, but like the PlayStation house was not a house of open world. But that's what this is. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, in a lot of ways, it does lean very heavily on the Ubisoft type formula, but perfects it in terms of it finds those things that are negative hits on that Ubisoft formula and kind of excises them from the design patterns. And so it's it's particularly like as I mentioned, I'm an Ubisoft stan. I love lots of things in the Ubisoft design pattern. I love outpost takedowns, and you get a ton of outpost takedowns, and you get a ton of provenance in choosing how you want to go about that because you're given different skills, and because the geometry is so complex, you get some outposts that the only way to approach them is from below elevation, right? So you're fighting an uphill battle, and that creates a tactical problem. You get some outposts that literally back onto a cliff. And if you know how to get onto the cliff, then you can get down, and that presents a tactical pathway. But some others don't. Some have some hills, right? But like, so you can get an attack off, but like, then once you're discovered, then you have a problem because then to get to the outpost, the only thing you do is fight your way back down the hill, turn a corner, and proceed straight ahead into the outpost. So, like I said, it's doing a lot of things that really perfect that Ubisoft formula in a lot of good ways.
Nice. And here down under, you're absolutely right. Like my comparison of the different studios is they do play off each other and learn from each other. And my example here is a little skewed because the games I'm citing are multiple years apart, right? Like we have not seen what Naughty Dog's new game is. I mean, we know what it is, but we don't necessarily see what it plays out like. Because they've been, it's not fair to compare it against a PlayStation 4 era game that's been remastered, just like Forbidden West was an early PS5 game. So, Sucker Punch is in a good spot to be able to learn and be able to take advantage of it feels like it's the first one out of those first party studios that is really taking advantage of the PlayStation 5 to the degree that we hoped was possible.
Well, I mean, there's and so your one statement like that they learned it from each other is spot on because in like the trio of videos that I took this weekend, there is literally a scene in this that feels it's on horseback. Like, well, actually, the scene that we just saw, right, where I was going through and firing arrows without aiming, right, which is it's a quick fire, quick aim skill that you're given. But that scene, as you play it, feels very, very much like the car chase scene in Uncharted 4. So much so that it
Sure. Okay.
it clicked in my mind as I was going through it. I was like, oh, this is the car chase scene with Tommy and Nathan. But I don't want to take away from the comment that you made, because I do think it is fair to compare the studios and what they're doing, because I mean, well, I mean, I want to both give you credit and give Sucker Punch credit, right? Sucker Punch has done a thing here which maybe arguably transcends what they've achieved before, and in some ways transcends what the other studios have done, because they've gone about aggregating some things that the other studios have done, as well as some other things that have been done in video gaming in general, and made a really immaculate delivery. By the same token, that doesn't necessarily mean that the next PlayStation studio is going to pull off a thing, that well. Like Horizon Forbidden West gets nickelbacked. I mean, we've all talked about that before. But Horizon Forbidden West is not a perfect game, and it's not simply because that game came out earlier, right? Like
that's very fair, right? It makes some design choices in its open worldness that that are different than what Ghost of Yotei is doing. Yep. All right. We have 3 big games that we spent the first almost hour of our podcast talking about. So let's move to the second segment as we talk about some news headlines. Maybe we'll skim through these a little bit quicker and give us a chance to dive in to where it feels appropriate. But I'm going to start off as it feels, I don't know, a par for the industry course that we get another round of layoffs. Actually, this one is around Amazon shedding 14,000 jobs, many of which are in executive segments. This article I picked up from GameIndustry.biz, and the reason it is relevant for us in talking about video games is that it also includes a significant chunk of their game studios that let's see, where are we at with Amazon Game Studios? They have launched a number of different games over the years. Their most successful aspects were probably 2021's New World, which is an MMO. And then that MMO recently had kind of a standalone launch on Xbox and PlayStation that was both an MMO but also provided more single player content. That MMO is moving into maintenance mode. They have had successful launches of Last Epoch, which was a Korean-based action RPG. So they published that. They've definitely had some misses along the way with things like, I know that we've talked about them here on this podcast. Things like Crucible. They've announced that Amazon Studios does now own Crystal Dynamics, and that work on a new Tomb Raider game from Crystal Dynamics is still moving forward. They have an open world game by Maverick Games, open world driving game from Maverick Games. This is a follow-up article that I pulled from PC Gamer. That so some of the biggest ones that are impacted are the yet unreleased Lord of the Rings MMO. There is still the Turbine Legacy Lord of the Rings Online that still exists, which was 20 years old at this point, or almost 20 years old. But this was a new Lord of the Rings MMO that had been planned to come out in 2022 and was pushed back and has now been canceled. Amazon Studios did release a game this year called King of Meat, which I don't know that we've ever talked about on this show, but based on its Steam concurrence in the couple of hundreds, it hasn't necessarily realized itself as a very successful property or launch. So Amazon Game Studios has definitely been struggling. A few weeks ago, they just relaunched or kind of combined their Prime Gaming and their Luna all into one aspect. Prime Gaming was tied in with Twitch. It had, it gave away free games and in-game content for Amazon Prime subscribers, and Luna has been out since 2021 at this point. And has just kind of re-envisioned itself as more of a Jackbox kind of party game aspect as well. All of this to be said, I think the one piece that I was peeling back onion layers on is the article from PC Gamer this week as well, but it cites an article, or it cites a LinkedIn post from back in March of this year from an Amazon Studios VP talking about where they struggled and how they struggled to basically their plan, or their larger goal was to disrupt Steam, which I never even realized that was where Amazon was going with this. And so it really kind of puts in perspective some of the management struggles and the executive corporate decisions around their game space. So as somebody who has claimed Amazon games over the course of the years, who owns a Luna controller and has played a few Luna games, it always has felt kind of an add-on benefit to an Amazon Prime versus trying to become, trying to take the Amazon retail model and take over the Steam game store space. As you take a big drink, Game Logic, any thoughts here as I summarize multiple different articles around this news story?
Several. I'll try and go through them rapid fire. One comes from, in similar vein, going back through the history and looking at, things that have been said by Amazon before. One of the things that I picked up on is, and this is a quote, I think from a Eurogamer article, or actually from a PC Gamer article also. Former Prime Gaming VP Ethan Evans said earlier this year that we assumed that size and visibility would be enough to attract customers, but we underestimated the power of existing user habits. We never validated our core assumptions before investing heavily in solutions. The truth is that gamers already had the solution to their problems, and they weren't going to switch platforms just because a new one was available. So, that statement to me resonates on a couple of topics. Number one, and I wrote an article earlier this week, I think that was called, I was just looking at, it's the one I was just reading from, No Savior is Coming, the Post-Platform Reality of the Gaming Industry. And so in that quote and in these things that have happened, we have, I've heard comments that, hey, if as Xbox winds down and dwindles and continues to lose market share, that, if they get out of the industry, we'll be fine with PlayStation and Nintendo. Somebody else will come replace them. No, they won't, because what is true over the 25-year history is that the only people who have been able to mount an entrance into the gaming industry are members of the $1 trillion club. Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Two of them have failed. NVIDIA is going to try and go at it via partnership with MediaTek, but they're coming in to provide tech. Apple is game curious, but isn't really fully getting in the pool, which I think is okay.
Right.
Two of
They've
the
already
$1 trillion
kind of
guys
dipped in and out of that pool.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Two of the $1 trillion guys have toppled over. Like, so if Xbox does loses interest because their shareholders lose interest, because the C-suite loses interest, because a combination of people, continue to ask and the volume continues to rise as to why are we putting billions of dollars against this when we are not able to be competitive? Despite the revenue, right? And they are number 2 in revenue amongst the platform console owners. And a lot of the question is about how much is being expended to make that boat go. So that's one thing. The second thing is also, while we have this week, and it's a little bit of a jump ahead maybe to the earnings discussion, you have a lot of PR that was done this week prior to Xbox's earnings announcement about what their new strategy is with gaming. And a lot of people mistakenly feel that the comments that were made this week do not indicate a new strategy. There is a reason why C-level officers, VPs, and people are out on a PR trail doing interviews about gaming the week of an earnings call. Like, if you haven't been around C-suite officers and you haven't been around like a major corporation, a Fortune 500 company, when it is earnings call week, that is not the norm. And there's a set of instones that are tied to the Bloomberg article dropping, saying that there's a push for 30% margins in the gaming division, to all the PR that those guys did, to the earnings call. Like, there is a coming shift in how they're going to go about doing their business. And the point was to get that word out in a very harmonious effect across the 4 leaders who put that out, to defray the types of questions that could come in as sniper shots around, hey, you guys are pushing for 30% margins. How are you guys going to do that? Like, what's going on?
I think that news story from last week is pretty significant, as it ties into not only the story that you have in terms of living room space and strategic realignment, but also their earnings investment pieces. Like, and it ties back to how many other stories that we have covered. Like, if the 30% is an accurate marker of what's being expected, when most game studios feel good if they're hitting the 15%. It's no surprise that we have seen as heavy cuts as possible, or as we have, in order to try to thin that margin down so they can make some of those targets.
And the last thing I'll mention that this story evokes is that I have serious concerns that Xbox is heading down a similar path. When you hear the things that were mentioned this week, that our primary competitors are TikTok and short form video, I think that is a misassessment. I think that there is a lack of realization of the stratification and categorization by which different types of content compete against each other, because you don't consume content in the same scenarios and use cases where you consume TikTok and short form video as you do gaming. And in the way like content competes against like content, right? That TikTok and short form video is a video format, and therefore maybe competes more so right directly with other types of video format. And it also ignores the knock-on effect, where a report that I read earlier this week about different types of content in this new economy is sometimes additive. And for instance, the music industry is actually finding a correlation, right, and a help and a knock-on effect from TikTok, because lots of the new generation is discovering, that's how they're discovering some music artists.
Sure, right. They're discovering music that way and then going out to follow up on it versus,
Because you have like a Gracie Abrams, who maybe, I don't know that Gracie did this, but many artists in that ilk, right, who are kind of that age and coming about and are being discovered before they get a big recording contract, right? Natalie Jane, are being discovered. And Natalie Jane, her big thing was Instagram, and that's where lots of people discovered her. And then when she got a contract, she kind of immediately had a following.
Right.
And
You're not
so,
just you're not discovering a game developer this way. Like, you may discover a game through some of these streaming pieces, but whether it correlates to the same effect that Microsoft executives are thinking is yeah.
well, I mean, maybe not to the same degree that you discover music, but the point I was trying to tie is in as there's also a knock-on effect and an additive effect from TikTok, right? In terms of and not just competing, that gamers, when they are away from their consoles and their PCs and their set-top boxes, consume TikTok during the day, during breaks at work, while they're sitting in the car waiting, while they're in the grocery store line, whatever, right? And they consume gaming content like 35. So the difference in consumption between the two media formats is that there were 1.3 trillion hours of of video gaming consumed last year. There were 880 billion hours of TikTok and short form video consumed last year, but 35 billion of that was gaming content. So then you think about, okay, and then also how much are people absorbing on Twitch? How much of the short form video content, how much of the YouTube content, the long form video content, is also video gaming? And so the point is that, you know, a strategy that's designed to compete against those may ignore how those formats can be used to actually accelerate your business, is part of the concern that I have. But at the end of the day, my concern is, in similar vein, they're trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist. They're making a misassessment, and they're going to spend billions of dollars chasing that in a way that I think is likely to turn out unsuccessful.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of what Amazon did, and it directly ties into what it feels like Microsoft is stumbling down the path of. So, Nate, glad to have you here. Thanks for making it. Game Logic, let's jump ahead. We'll come back to the other two, but because we're talking about Microsoft, let's hit on your news story about PC in the living room from Igor's lab, and then talk a little bit about earnings calls, since you teed that up as well, since it feels like we're rumbling down this path of concern over Microsoft's Xbox viability in the long run.
Yeah, and I won't spend too long on this. I actually had number one, I unfortunately forgot that Tao wasn't going to be here tonight. I actually put this in the rundown because I've had tons of opportunity to talk about this topic, and I was teeing it up for you guys to, because it's sometimes fun to let our hair down, figuratively speaking, and speculate. But this is all, this article over on Igor's Lab. Xbox Next, Microsoft plans Windows PC for the living room. Console era faces strategic realignment. Kind of intermixes the things that we've heard this week, but also talks about what is this next Xbox console. We've obviously had tons of leaks from Moore's Law is Dead, talking about how this thing is going to come about. Igor obviously approaches this from a much more technical perspective, so I'll try and pick a few things out. He mentions
where we've had other news stories about kind of where it's landing potentially price wise and market spec wise, being up on the higher end.
Yeah. Igor mentions at the heart of this transformation is a completely new SoC called Magnus, which, according to leaked information, will be manufactured using TSMC's 3-nanometer process. The chip surface area of a whopping 408 millimeters squared is one of the larger calibers and exceeds the dimensions of classic APU solutions. But the really exciting thing is the structure. Instead of a monolithic die, a dual chiplet design is used, in line with current manufacturing trends. The CPU and GPU are physically separated, but communicate via a shared interposer. AMD's signature is once again evident here, as they are not only responsible for production, but are also supplying the architecture based on Zen 6 and RDNA 5. Chiplet designs are now a core competence at AMD, even if they are becoming increasingly difficult to cool and coordinate with growing complexity, especially in a compact console housing. So, I mean, the premise here is interesting. One of the things for me personally is, if this thing winds up being kind of a mini PC, if you guys remember, a few years ago, I built like a bread box around like the mini ITX form factor, and initially at least started using it as a streaming PC. If this could fulfill that space, that would be useful. I have Macs now, and I went down this path because I'd heard so much about the Mac Mini M1 when it first came out on how it was a great streaming box. But I was a little concerned about trying to use it for that because so many of the tools that I use are, work really well with Windows, and some of them don't work great with the Mac version. But if I had a Windows-based thing that somebody else built that I did, wouldn't have to deal with a tiny box, right? Trying to get everything, that's interesting. But from a gaming perspective, it's interesting. But the loss of a console, Xbox, presents a question about how much it's needed. If what it plays is PC games, then for a person who's a PC gamer, like the three of us are, it's kind of like, well, why would you buy that if you have already, are already spending lots of money on a PC? Does it make it that much easier for you to have, I mean, it's essentially just a pre-built is kind of what the value prop of it is. So I don't know. Any
Yeah,
thoughts
if
on
it can
that, DB?
come with a simplified interface and the usability of what traditionally is thought of as a console, I can see that there's a space for it. But I'm hesitant to get too excited about it after hearing reports and experiences from the ROG Ally X, and how yes, this should be your Xbox interface to make it simple and have everything run, and how it's not there yet in terms of it's still a handheld PC with a somewhat of an Xbox interface, but not necessarily a plug and play aspect that people expect out of a console. And if this goes down that same path, I think your question is valid. Is what does this audience look like? Like if this is a mid-spec price point gaming PC, like for people who are in that arena, what's their incentive to move out of the PC based aspect of it, and why have a set top box that's going to be basically the same thing? And for people that are traditional console kind of casual players, is this 3 steps too far down the line?
Yeah, and my last comment on it is, over the last few weeks, I've brought up a lot of things of like that could go wrong with this. I kind of said it half jokingly a couple of months back before the ROG Xbox Ally ever came out, and I mentioned that for a lot of people, your gamer tag login is the same as your Microsoft account, and so in the OOTB, in the out of the box experience of Windows, when you either install Windows or when you go to start Windows up for the first time, one of the things it does is it asks you to log in, and when you log in on a PC, it immediately starts auto syncing with OneDrive. It is one of the most frustrating things in the world when building a PC, and you can't turn it
Well,
off
and
immediately.
isn't OneDrive on ROG Ally X as
It
well?
is, and it does the
Yeah.
same thing. And I said it at the time. I kind of jokingly said, I said, that would be horrible if it does that. And I said, but I'm sure they will script that out. Nope, that's exactly what it does. And during one of the patches and taking Windows updates, it installs Microsoft Teams. So that's kind of some of the simple stuff. But the bigger stuff that I hit on this week is what I've said is, if this thing is a Windows box, the problem is that it's never going to get but so good. And as I've drawn analogies to things like this that Microsoft has tried to do before, they tried to do this with netbooks, they try to do this with the Surface tablets. The bigger, better examples that I realized this weekend is I said, "Oh no, these guys did this with Windows Media Center also." And Windows Media Center was a great experience 82% of the time. But the problem was that 18% of the time, it did the same stuff that Windows normally does. It harassed you about updates. It interrupted what you were doing in your Windows big screen environment and told you needed to run quick scan. It, harassed you and beat you up about UX. This is a thing where even if it's a console, if it's Windows, it will do those things, because I don't believe, no matter what they do, I don't believe that the side of the Windows team that's responsible for security, right, and which the guys doing the patches, the guys doing the 20xH1 and 2 updates, the quick scan, I don't think that, so you're going to get asked, you're going to be told to stop what you're doing, and you have to run quick scan because you haven't run quick scan recently enough in Windows Defender. And the big thing that I think that is going to torpedo this thing and blow it out of the water is, you go and you buy this thing, it operates like a console, you're happy with it for 2 or 3 months because it's going to launch in November of 2027. But in January or February of 2028, Windows 11 28H1 is going to come out, and you're going to be forced to upgrade because they don't give you an option, and the only way to work around that is to be an uber nerd and take yourself out of the update ring. And it's a thing. Like you said, they're a significant way away from getting there, because to get there is not just solving the UI problem. And I said this before too, there's a hyper focus on this UI, and there's a hyper value prop presented around this UI. And I keep saying, guys, the UI is not the problem.
Yep.
Yes, you need UI help on a handheld. I get that. I don't really need it anywhere else. I use fences on Windows 11 on my boxes. I put all of my game launchers and stuff in fences. I don't need your help, Microsoft, to fix that problem. I need you to fix all the other stuff, and that's what they're not doing.
Well, I think, from a boardroom perspective, I can see the kind of corporate logic of, well, sure, these things will talk to each other. It's going to be fine. These people, one team across the unit can support this other unit. I can see how things get greenlit, but in the functionality of it, I don't see how it gets solved, because, as we'll talk about in the next news story, if the Xbox hardware is not selling and the market share for hardware is decreasing on the Xbox side, what is Microsoft's, on the Windows 11 support team and development team, what is their incentive to, fork off something that then is specific to this small, increasingly smaller market share, and where's the return on investment in that? And so it feels like it's going to be a hard sell to have something that is console unique to address the usability aspect, rather than just swallow the bitter pill of dealing with Windows 11 and subsequent upgrades on, quote unquote, Microsoft's next console. With that great news, let's go into the Xbox quarterly sales. So, as I alluded to, the Xbox quarterly sales their hardware is down. So this is a news article coming out of GameIndustry.biz. Revenue is up 18% year on year. Net income is up 12% year over year. The personal computing aspect revenue is up 4%, all of which sounds pretty good from an overall Microsoft perspective. The challenge here is that the overall gaming revenue fell by 2%. And as they quote here, as we can see if you're watching the video, driven by a decline in Xbox hardware, right? We've seen stories over the past 6 months of big box retailers like Costco and Sam's Club getting rid of Xbox hardware. We've seen brick and mortar stores getting rid of Xbox physical game sales. Walmart, Target, Best Buy still have them. So I don't want to go all doom and gloom here, but it recognizes the kind of decline in the hardware sales It does show some growth in content services, including Game Pass, better than quote unquote better than expected performance on third-party content. So it's not all doom and gloom in terms of the Xbox, segment of Microsoft. But thinking about its stake in the hardware space, it definitely raises some concerns over the long-term viability. It also makes a whole lot of sense, as you all were talking about last week, with Halo Campaign Evolved coming to PlayStation 5, the kind of multi-platform releases around Microsoft software, as we saw this week with Outer Worlds 2 being out on everything day and date. So I think it ties into this larger conversation of kind of the platform struggles that Xbox as a hardware manufacturer and console is having, and it will probably continue to have if they're, as our last story, as we just talked about, if their next console is something more on the higher end of a console into the mid-range gaming PC pre-built aspect.
I mean, I guess my cut is I don't want to, like me personally, I'm not putting it all on hardware. Hardware has been in the bathtub since the second year of this generation. Like it's a constantly leaking sieve. I think the insight that I seize on is that a year ago they had just started putting their games on PlayStation. It is now a year later. They have a significant catalog on PlayStation. Those games have been in the top of PlayStation charts for many months. Forza Horizon 5 is experiencing a better commercial year this year off of its port to PlayStation 5 than it did in its first year, in its launch year on the Xbox platform, Xbox and PC. That's a significant amount of lift to the airplane for them to be coming in with no growth. And the growth is flat because constant currency then like eliminated like the 1% that they had. Like so to me like the hardware is a foregone conclusion. That's past an opening. Like there's never going to be any recovery in hardware. The thing that is more concerning to me is that the big push in strategy change was to get their games on all platforms. They now have their games, a significant number of games on the biggest platform there is, and it doesn't appear to be helping. That in conjunction with the fact that they put Call of Duty in Game Pass, which caused them a negative $300 million hit. These things are not good. And this is why I go back to, they obviously knew that this was what the numbers said before they started doing this PR tour. And there are people who are convinced that they're just going to keep doing the same things that they've been doing more, and that's somehow going to help them achieve the new objectives that they've stated and achieve their goal. And I'm like, they've already raised prices on Game Pass before. This isn't the first time they've raised Game Pass prices. They've been increasing Game Pass prices. They've already been putting their games on other platforms. That's not new. So you don't achieve new objectives and new goals and fix problems by continuing to do the same things that you were doing that didn't fix the problems before. And you do not tell investors that you are doing different things to address the problem and then not do them. So again, if you think you're getting the same content in the same package with the same monetization that you've gotten before, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I as someone who jumped on the Xbox platform at the beginning of the Xbox One cycle in 2014, 2013 is when it launched. I've felt relatively strong about Xbox moving forward over that decade. And this year is really the year when I take a step back and have a pause about the longevity of Microsoft as a platform. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's still going to be a software publisher, and it's going to be a successful software publisher. But increasingly, I see not only the writing on the wall, but also I don't see a roadmap that puts them in a space where they're going to be successful in a hardware space going forward.
Well, and kind of like you said, like I think what you're seeing disposition of what they're going to do about hardware to the point of hardware not being a question or an issue anymore. Like,
right. Yeah, I think that's the point, right?
Hardware will become for them the same strategic positioning that it is for them on Windows, and they don't care personally about how their own hardware does. They just care that other people are able to sell hardware that carry their operating system on it. And I think, Magnus is going to come out. What I've said is I think Magnus will be the last. And then I think the push is, as Sarah Bond said, like the push is going to be, okay, now Asus, Acer, Alienware, Dell, HP, Samsung, Razer, we need you guys to make these boxes, and carry the Windows license on them like you guys always do. We're just going to call them Xboxes.
Yep, I think that is the path, and that matches what they've done, with the larger Microsoft as a platform as well. Is that it is an install of something on someone else's device. So, all right, let's hit one more Q1 revenue here. Another news story from GameIndustry.biz. This one from Sophie McAvoy around EA, that EA has their revenue is down 9% year over year. Their net income is down 53% year over year, and their net bookings are down 13% year over year. That is factoring in the fact that excuse me, that was a bad spike on the mic as I coughed into it, but that Microsoft, that Madden and FC both saw significant gains over 25. So FC this year has done better and performing better than it did last year. Sales of FC 26 rose in the single digits. But all of this is to say that I can see, if this is the kind of spreadsheets and the financial reporting that EA was looking at, I can see why they were very glad to have someone come in and buy them out at a rate higher than their current stock price if they were struggling even with stronger sales in two of their bigger franchises. One of the things that this article does mention is that at the, during their earnings call, is that EA clarified, and this is in the bottom of this article, that they will not host a earnings call for quarter two, and quote unquote, they will no longer provide forward-looking guidance because they are anticipating moving private. So this ties back into the news story that we had last month around Silver Lake and the PFI from Saudi Arabia purchasing EA, which is not been ratified yet. It has been proposed and accepted by the board. It needs to go through a process and is anticipated to be finalized at the beginning of 2027. But it speaks to the fact that EA is already positioning itself of not sharing that information because they're moving private. And so the challenges that they were already seeing, we've Tao has been on here talking about Skate and Skate's early access launch, and it having they talk about having a successful launch of it. Battlefield 6 had a successful launch and has now come under some scrutiny from players after their Battle Royale REDSEC release this week. in terms of the new Battle Pass, which is a $25 purchase. So lots of questions around EA, but we will not be seeing answers in terms of what these earnings reports provide because they are moving private. Game Logic, do you want to hit on your other two news articles, or do you want to jump into the final segment here?
I'll just make mention of them as one-liners. The other two news articles we were going to cover is first, Intel Panther Lake CPU benchmarks leak. So for people who saw the Core Ultra 7s come out last year, that were disappointing both in desktop and laptop, Panther Lake is the new chip that's supposed to be going to laptops. It appears to be, the CPU appears to be underperforming the Core 7, the Core Ultras, which is not promising to people who are interested in laptops, because you now see the next chip that's coming out from Intel underperforming, right? The last thing that they put out, which means also it's not going to be competitive against Halo, which is our Halo Point, I think, which is the next AMD chip that is designed to be used for both handhelds and laptops. And the other news story we were going to talk about is Nintendo wins lawsuit against Pirate, who boasted you might run a corporation, but I run the streets. So I won't get into a ton of specifics on that, but there was a streamer named Jesse Every Game Guru Kahin who streamed pirated games from Nintendo, and then basically challenged them on it publicly on stream. And this is a great example of FAFO, particularly with regards to Nintendo, which everyone should know by now. Don't dork around with Nintendo from a legal perspective. You choose not to learn that lesson, then there you go.
Right. Well, let's move into our third and final segment. Infinite Umbra, glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us on the stream. Always glad to have you along with everyone else here tonight. As I was just talking about with EA and their earnings call, I'm talking about Battlefield 6. They did drop REDSEC, which was the anticipated Battle Royale mode that is freestanding. You can download that separately. It also launches within Battlefield 6 if you own Battlefield 6. I do not own Battlefield 6, so I downloaded this separately. It did not play the overall Battle Royale mode, but I played a number of rounds of Gauntlet, which is a smaller mode of it. You're broken up into teams of 4, and you have kind of Battlefield-like objectives that you need to complete, where you are, moving intel or capturing spaces, and then the higher scored teams move on to the next round. It's a series of 3 rounds. And that third and final round then becomes kind of a deathmatch round. So it did not win any of those, but I, enjoyed the kind of gameplay of something that it tries to honor some of the objective-based gameplay around Battlefield and do so within kind of a multiplayer Battle Royale aspect. So I'll be curious to see what REDSEC ends up, where it ends up kind of landing in this space. If it draws the number of players that they were hoping for, if it's competitive with Call of Duty Warzone and all the other, battle royales out there, how much of it is competitive. It's not necessarily going to take on Fortnite. It's more of a grounded one that falls in line more with somewhere between PUBG and Warzone. So yeah, but also looking at the community and listening to the community after this REDSEC dropped, a lot of frustration around the emphasis on some of the things that REDSEC brings, and whether or not how much of that pulls support from the existing traditional Battlefield 6 multiplayer kind of big maps and zones and things like that. Game Logic, you have been playing Project Wingman on PC.
Yeah, I know we are getting tight on time, but DBQ, I've got to gush about this game. And I've had this game.
Please do.
I've had this game in my library for quite some time, and what I didn't realize is that for people who are Ace Combat fans, um, who are unhappy about the fact that like I don't know what's going on with Bandai Namco and Ace Combat. I guess there is a new one in development, but the series has really stagnated in terms of like how frequently we get them. Um, this is an Ace Combat clone. Uh, like right down to the cheesy dialogue in like the briefing sequences. Um, and I mean, it literally plays exactly like Ace Combat. Like you get, in each mission you earn currency, and in between missions you get to, you can spend that currency to get access to new airframes. There are skins in the game, so that you can equip your airplane with different skins. And so I am having a royal blast with this. It's allowing me to get my flight control systems out. So here I'm playing with the T-16,000, with the Thrustmaster T-16,000 flight control system with the throttle and weapons control handle. It's a sim light, so that's kind of good. Like I am a big flight sim fan, but it's giving me an opportunity to not be as cognitively loaded as I am playing Digital Combat Simulator with like the 102 step startup process to the Mi-24 Hind helicopter. That like I had to like make my own knee boards for on a spreadsheet, right? So I can get through it. This allows you to get into the game, play it. I was able to configure the controller very quickly. The controller setup isn't like totally intuitive. There's, and actually I was surprised when I went into the controls. I was like, wait, this is all the controls? There's got to be more. There are takeoff and landing sequences in this, but there's no afterburner button. And in the landing sequence in particular, there's no like wheel control, so there's no brake to hit. So I had to pause on the landing sequence and Google it, and I'm like, how am I supposed to hit the brakes on the wheels to stop the aircraft? They're like, just reduce your thrust to 0, and the aircraft will brake. So, but it is, like I said, it's remarkably like Ace Combat. There are 21 missions in the campaign that comes with the game, and then there's an expansion pack that's like $5 that adds like another 6 missions. Then there's a mode called Conquest, which I haven't played yet. But Conquest has like 41 or 43 missions, and it's essentially a roguelike where you keep going on missions, and your aircraft keeps getting damaged, and then and I think it's damage that I think doesn't repair completely in between missions, but but then you'll come back and like you'll have extra stuff, or you'll retain upgrades that you got. So it is really awesome. I mean, it perfectly scratches the itch of kind of like an arcadey, a little bit above arcadey flight sim, and I'm having a great time.
This is originally, it came out in 2020, at the end of the year of 2020. It's by Sector D2. And yeah, it has those additional modes in it. It looks like it also has VR support as
It
well.
does.
So
Yeah, and I think that's where I actually got it from, is when I was really big into VR, which I'm planning on getting back into. I've still got my Oculus Rift headset, and there are new VR headsets coming out. But this is one that I foresee doing a ton of replay with, where I'm playing the campaign, and I'm playing at a low difficulty level right now. I will probably replay the campaign at a higher difficulty level. I will probably replay the campaign in VR. So yeah, having a great time with it.
nice. All right. Well, let's head into let's wrap up our show for this week. Looking at what's coming out next week, or the current week here, as we head into Monday, the November 3rd. On the 4th, we have Universal Unisalis 5, which seems like it's getting solid reviews, but also has a lot of depth to it. And even some of the kind of players in this space have, the depth seems to be, is it too much? So it'll be interesting to see how the community responds to this. Infinite Umbra, yes. Game Logic talked about Outer Worlds 2 at the top of the show, so after we're done, go ahead and rewind us back and listen to his experiences on Outer Worlds 2. I bet next week I'll be talking about it. Tao probably will be talking about it as well. So if you've had a chance to play it, love to hear your experience as well, Infinite Umbra. Also this week, we've got Carrion, which is coming out on the 5th for PC and PlayStation 5. It is a climbing game. I remember playing the demo of this back in the summer Steam Next Fest. Definitely it has some sim aspects to it in terms of individual kind of handholds and tension and stamina and grip strength. Much more kind of a cell shaded graphic look, but also feels a little more nuanced than Jusant, which was Don't Nod's climbing game from 2 years ago. On the Switch this week, we have Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So this is the Muso game from Tecmo Koei. Around the continuation. This one is technically canon in terms of its story of what happens before Tears of the Kingdom, but is very much a Dynasty Warriors like game. And then another game that I threw on here that I have on my wish list is Rebel Engine. It's from a small development team in Argentina. They are Seven Leaf Clover. It's a kind of a boomer shooter narrative game. Both Swiss and I have dabbled in this, and he's got it on his wish list as well. So a couple games, not nearly as much that it came out here in the last section of October. But then in 2 weeks from now, we get Call of Duty, and we get some more games coming as we head into the holiday buying season as well. Anything else, Game Logic, sitting on your list, or any final thoughts before we round out the show?
Now, there's really not much, and I've looked out like throughout the remainder of the month of November and into December. Really not a lot left on the slate for this year. As opposed to, like, I think last year when we got Avatar in December. So it'll be kind of interesting to see the year winding down on the approach path to the cutoff of the Game Awards, which is like probably November-ish. And as you mentioned, Don't Nod, I think it's also worth mentioning Don't Nod, who just recently got a deal with Netflix to develop a video game based on one of their bigger IPs. I suspect that is Stranger Things. We'll see. Could also be a Nola Holmes video game. That would be interesting.
Sure. But yeah, Stranger Things definitely fits within the kind of Life is Strange kind of supernatural vibes of things. Here Down Under, glad to know that you're playing Ascent with your son. It's it's an enjoyable co-op game. Ascent came out in 2023 or 2022, I believe. Had a DLC with it as well. Kind of isometric top-down or kind of side angle. So, yeah, I am. It feels like there's still a lot to play, but also the calendar's starting to thin out, and I'm starting to think about what I need to make sure I come back to as I think about end of the year stuff. So,
yes, we do need to start putting together our gaming superlatives list. Thank you for the reminder.
Exactly. All right. Well, this has been episode 410 for the week of November 7th. Hero Down Under, Innate, Infinite Umbra, anyone else who has been here to listen and join in the chat. We really appreciate your commentary and your comments. Always glad to have you engage with us. Not only ask questions, but to share your own experiences. So if you're listening to this after the fact, again, as I said at the top of the show, we record every Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Feel free to jump in and join us, share some of your experiences, tell us where we're wrong in our analysis, and we're glad to have that engagement with you. So for myself, DBQ Hams and Game Logic, this has been enough to keep going. Until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.